Hello, everyone. I am Lori Barnes with Kepler College, and I'm here with Marie O'Neill, and we're going to talk about the nodes. We have a sign change coming up with the nodes, and so we are speaking to Marie to tell us what that's going to look like. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce Marie. She's the founder of Padma Life Coaching, located in Santa Rosa, California. Marie has many years of experience as a life coach, astrologer, speaker coach, healing retreat facilitator, and lecturer. She's a distinguished Toastmaster through Toastmasters International. She's on the board of directors with TEDx Sonoma County and is an astrologer teacher with Forest Center for Evolutionary Astrology. She also teaches with Kepler College. And Marie lectures at numerous astrology conferences and is the published author of And the Lotus Opened, a memoir. Marie's passion is helping others achieve their dreams, goals, and to shine brightly in the world. Welcome, Marie.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Laurie. That's
My
good.
pleasure. I'm so happy that you're here with us. And
Me
I know
too.
I know you're an evolutionary astrologer, and I'm particularly interested in the nodes. So I'm super excited to hear about your take on the nodes in general and the sign changes coming up. So I think the first thing that I want to ask you is tell us about the nodes and what they mean to you in your practice as an evolutionary astrologer.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that question. In evolutionary astrology, for me, the nodes, they're pivotal. It is where, with the South Node, it tells us the skills, the gifts, the wounding in some ways, how we got hurt in a prior life. And the karma, I say the karma has ripened with your node. So it's back, whatever it is you need to work on and heal to move forward. It's all in, well, it's in the entire chart, but that South Node is specifically what you need to work on. It's not like some astrologers say bad, and it's not even good. It just is. There's some wonderful gifts with that South Node that you want to hold on to, and they're gifts that you have acquired in prior lives. And it's also, it could be something that you got hurt in a prior life. It could represent something that you got wrong in a prior life that you're back to correct and work on. It is also, it's a memory, because we always pick up where we left off. So we live a lot of times in that South Node. That's our natural default, for good or for ill. So it is, I once heard someone say, if you were an artist in a prior life, you're coming back and you're going to be an artist with that South Node, because that's the memory. It's your default. And what we want to do is work on healing that South Node, or the injuries that we have from that South Node, and move towards the North Node. The North Node is typically dormant in the chart, at least in the way that I practice it. It's dormant until you start working and healing the South Node. Now, sometimes, even though I say it's dormant, some people have that North Node conjunct another planet in their chart. If that North Node is conjunct your sun, or conjunct Pluto, or any of the other planets, you're going to really be being pushed towards activating that North Node. The thing is, with the South Node, a lot of times there is fear involved with that South Node, and it's fear, but it's our comfort, and we reject sometimes moving out of our comfort zone, but we need to. And in order to work with that south node to move towards the north node, you've got to look at the aspects to the south node. You've got to look at the ruler of the south node and where it is by house and sign. And you're also looking, because with the south node, let me back up a little bit, the south node represents who you were. So if you look at, say you have south node in Libra, we're going to be looking at that coming up. So you have south node in Libra, then you're looking at, okay, where's the ruler? What is the ruler of Libra? We know it was Venus. Well, what house and sign is Venus in? That's going to tell you who you were in a prior life. And so you're looking at the house and sign position of the south node and the ruler of that south node by house and sign to give you your part of your nodal story. So that's who you are. And if you have two rulers, if you're like me, who I have Pisces south node, I have to look to Neptune and to Jupiter and their placement. And I'm looking at also the relationship between Neptune and Jupiter, in aspect. And all of that gives me a plethora of information about myself, or and who I was in a prior life. So in addition to that, you're looking at the aspects to that south node, meaning you're looking at the relationship of the south node with other planets. If you have a planet square that south node, you were at cross purposes with someone in a prior life. Or maybe you have a trine with that south node in another planet. You then, that person, because when I'm reading the south node initially as a slightly on the negative side, because you're looking for the wounding there, you're looking for the karma, and doesn't mean that the south node, like I said, is all bad or anything like that, but you're looking for that because you're looking for it in the negative, because you want to work on healing it. So if it's a trine, it could be somebody who supported you in your folly. That happens too. If it's an opposition, it's somebody who was completely opposed to you. It could be a person, it could be a group of people. If you're opposed by, say, Pluto, your south node, then that's a collective. That's a whole group of people, or somebody who had power and authority. Or if you're opposed by the sun, you couldn't get around it. So, but which is quite fascinating when you have the opposition, because think about it. Your north node is conjunct that planet that is opposing your south node. So guess where you've got to go?
So when you're talking about the south node and the north node, it sounds like you work with them together, right? I know that there's a few different variations out there for how different astrologers look at the nodes. We have the Indian philosophy, and then we have the Western philosophy, and then with evolutionary astrology, there's the past life part of it. So my question, what I really want to know for how you practice is, do you integrate them? Do you think that it's helpful to find a way to bring the south node and the north node together? Or is it more that you're leaving the south, you find your wounding, you work on the healing, and you're going towards the north node? Then do you find that in your practice, you focus then on doing more north node stuff and try to move away from south node stuff? Or is it about a combination and integration?
It's more of a combination. It's more of a combination, because you're always going to have that south node. And there's always the peeling back of the onion of working with that particular karma. But like I said, it could also be that you didn't get something wrong, you got something right in a prior life and you got hurt by it. So you've got to work on working with those skills, with that energy in a positive way, and getting over the fear. Because whenever you get hurt, there's an inherent fear that is involved. And so you're being asked to use the qualities of that South Node, the gifts of that South Node, in spite of the fear. So you have to work on it. And so when you do that, you're taking that South Node energy, the positive, and you're still applying it and working with that North Node. The two, it's like, what is it? It's an opposition. So when you think about how do you resolve an opposition, it's really not either or. It's, and of course, I know my chart the best because we all do. So for example, with that Pisces South Node, I have some inherent gifts with that, gifts that I have cultivated over lifetimes. And yet there is tremendous fear in coming out into the world and working with those. So what do? You have to have strategy. Where's that strategy coming from? It's not coming from Pisces. It's coming from Virgo. So that's, using it. It's the antidote. That North Node becomes the antidote for that South Node, but to heal that South Node, you still have to work with all the aspects of that South Node, and that will help you with the North Node. That will help you to activate that North Node and help you to use the skills of that North Node better. They could become allies in a way. I mean, that's the way I see it, even in an opposition. Of course, the South Node can go rogue and just want complete control. But if you're moving towards the North Node, you're going to feel that North Node tugging at you, saying, this is the way to go, or I know you want to do this, but let's strategize, let's figure it out. I know, does that make any sense?
Yeah. I like the concept because obviously I'm an astrologer too, and I work with the nodes, and I've heard, the few different ways that astrologers have used them. And I've always liked the evolutionary astrology approach because it gives you more, I think, to take to a client. I would love to hear your take on that, especially thinking that the South Node can become an ally. It's not something to run away from or to try to push away, thinking that I have to get away from that and go towards my North Node. Right? I mean, would you say that an important thing it sounds like an important takeaway when you're looking at your chart is that you go to your South Node and there can be fear there, there's some wounding there. And if you really work with that, you can actually take some strength, take some skills out of that. And that's going to help propel you to the North Node and to have some more success, right? Because it's about growth in this lifetime. So sorry, that was a very long, drawn out question about the positive, like ways to work with the South Node and not trying to ignore it.
Oh, absolutely. You never, in my opinion, you never want to ignore it because there's some wonderful gifts there. And a lot of times those gifts of the South Node are what you use to help you get through life. And, with that South Node, it could be maybe you, like I said, maybe you got hurt. Maybe you had a certain position in the family that you didn't want to have. Maybe you were married off and you didn't want to be married, or maybe you were in a bad relationship, or so you're going to. That's a fascinating thing with the South Node too, and I find it with the chart as a whole. But those woundings are triggered a lot of times in childhood. Something happens that triggers that energy because it has to be activated in order to work on it. And you have to, in a lot of ways, start questioning your life and the wounding and where did this come from? What is this about? And a lot of times with evolutionary astrology, what we do is we come up with a story to tell the client that matches the South Node and its aspects, and it's the ruler of the South Node. The story doesn't need to be true, although I have found that it's uncannily close a lot of times. It needs to resonate with the client, and because you're telling the story to get the feeling of the prior life, to help the client. Because a lot of times the client will say, oh my God, that's so true. This is going on with me in this life. So the story, it's that story that the client resonates with. And then, that's the beauty of it. Then you can look at the chart. And when I'm giving a reading, I will mention the aspects, but I look more to what is the integration, what is the intention of that particular sign. And a lot of times I don't even use astrology language too much in my readings because the client doesn't know. That's a whole nother story. So I'm telling the story, and I'm looking also at that North Node and telling another story for the remedy. It's like, okay, so what's the remedy for this? How do you work with this? And a lot of times, if the client has an issue that they're working with, that's when you bring out your counseling skill and you look at that North Node to help them strategize to come up with a way to work with that South Node. Because you want them to move towards the North Node, but you also want them to heal that South Node or heal the wounding from that South Node. And that can be a challenge. So, and a lot of times people are, we are incarnate in soul groups. And so a lot of times I have found that the people who harmed you in that prior life, they're back. And you end up in relationship with them. And you're wondering, oh my God, how did this happen? Well, you're not supposed to run. Or supposed to.
Right.
You're
The fastest way through something is to go through it, right? Not around
right.
it. Yeah. I'm curious, how do you work? Do you bring the house placements then into it when you're counseling a client?
Mm-hmm.
Like so regardless of the house system you use, I'm thinking if you find the nodes angular versus cadence, right?
Yeah.
So how do you work with the different houses?
Yeah, and I do bring, because that's the place, that's the arena where the wounding happened in a prior life. And that's also going to be the arena where you need to, activate that North Node and for the healing. Well, not for the healing, but after you start working on the healing. Because to heal, you really do need to look at the aspects of that South Node, the squares, the oppositions, and all that to work with that. But the house is going to tell you the arena in which you're going to be triggered with that South Node. If it's sixth house, do you see yourself as a slave? And when I say slave, you can be a slave to your family. You can be a slave at work. You can be a slave to, or do you have physical ailments, looking at all the sixth house ways that can come up, or fifth house, love affairs and children and creativity and all that. And so, yes, and I use the Placidus system. However, they all work. All of those different systems work. And yeah, and if it's on the angles, it's fascinating because each angle controls or has affinity over the next 3 houses. And so there's going to be what I call that bleed through. If it's 4th house, oh yeah, let's look at the 5th and the 6th too.
Wow. Well, speaking of that, then how about the transiting? So I know we're going to talk about the nodes and their shift in signs. But in general, when you're working with the nodes, how do you work with them in the natal chart placements and then the transiting placements? Is that something that you always look at when you're with a client?
Yeah, when I'm doing a reading for a client, of course, it all depends. Am I doing a transits and progressions reading for them, or am I doing a natal chart reading? If I'm doing a natal chart reading, I don't look at, of course, the transiting nodes at all. I'm looking at the nodal story, which is paramount. If I'm doing a transits and progressions reading, I still have to go back and remember that natal chart, nodal, maybe not nodal story completely, but the energy and what the natal position for the nodes are asking. And I look at the transiting nodes as the evolving. You're evolving with your healing, with your with the focus. So the focus shifts based on the sign and the house position, but the natal prediction is still paramount. And this is how you're moving through, because at some point you're going to get a nodal return, or you're going to get a square, or you're going, so, and those are checkpoints, I should say. I look at them, if you're going on a journey, you're going through different countries or whatever, you get little checkpoints along the way. And that's the way I see the nodes, and it's neither, when I look at it, I don't see it as good or bad. I see it as just is. This is how far, this is what you've evolved. This is what you've healed. How is it, how is it working for you? Because I always want to ask the client, especially with the nodes that are coming up, how are you working with your relationships? Are you finding any challenges? So if you are a person who natally has, say you had the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio, and now they're moving to Aries and Libra, it's like we were saying, you're still dealing with Venus. It's just shifted. So Venus was North Node. She was the go-to goddess. And with pulling you towards that North Node, and now she's working with the South Node. And it's still, so that means, what about the balance? What about the balance in your life? How do you work with that? How do you, are you being too nice? Are you supposed to, where's the courage? Where's the, because that North Node, you've got, that's that antidote for that South Node. So yeah, that's probably a long answer for that, but yeah.
So interesting. Well, so the conjunction, opposition, and the squares, do you find that at those times when you're working with someone, like I know you're a coach, a life coach, astrologer, so you get to work with people for longer periods of time. I'm wondering, do you see more life events come up at those time periods, at the opposition, conjunction, or the squares, as opposed to when, you know, they're maybe not a tight square, conjunction,
Right.
opposition. How does that work?
You know, with coaching clients, it's interesting because I do see the shift. And a lot of times it's their fear, a different aspect of the fear will come up, or they will have, it's like I've got clients now who can feel, they don't even know that the nodes are shifting, but they can feel that energy of the Aries, of the needing the courage of, and they're getting to this point where they're needing to take leaps of faith. And so I do find that I will work with them because they just naturally shift the client. It's fascinating how that happens, and I've been actually in awe of it because we've been dealing, we've been dealing so much with. Sorry, I need to plug my computer in. Give me just a second. I just got a little notice, so I'm glad we can edit that out.
I know, that's the beauty of pre-recording.
It's like, oh, I forgot to plug it in. Oh, good. Now, there we go. Okay. So I do find that with the clients, they naturally shift their focus when the nodes shift. And actually, usually it's a little bit before the nodes shift when they come, and they get their energy shifts. And I like that. So for example, being concerned more with money, with letting go, with I have a client now who's been dealing with a lot of debt, and that's that Scorpio Taurus axis, and where it is, and we have to regenerate. So they were dealing with that, and so now it's restructuring, but I still have to look at that natal prediction and what the natal chart is saying that they're working on. And a lot of times in my sessions, especially my coaching sessions, I keep that in mind, and I remind them, this is what you're working on. So the issue that you have brought is a prime example of what you're working on, and this is a good thing. So let's strategize and see how you can work with this issue in the highest, best possible way. So yeah, it's those nodes are pivotal, as is Pluto, as is Saturn.
Right, they all have their parts and their messages for us.
They do. They all
Yeah.
talk together too.
Mhm. And it's so important, like you were saying, to always go back to the natal chart. I think that's, if we have any newer astrology students out there listening, that, this is something that applies not just to the nodes, but to astrology in general, that, for most all of the things that you're doing in astrology, not everything, but for most things, you want to refer back to the natal chart, that most things don't stand alone outside of the natal chart. So I think that was important point that you mentioned that I wanted to echo.
Yeah, because I mean, the entire chart is karmic. I mean, you didn't get that chart by accident. It's a culmination of all those lifetimes. Or even if you don't believe in prior lives, you can look at it as biological karma. It's what you inherited from your ancestors. You can look at it that way too. And when I think about the nodes, they're the nodes of the moon. But remember, there's other nodes. There's the nodes of the other planets too, which I don't work with, but they're important too. But we've been working with mostly the nodes of the moon, which is our emotional body. And so we're working with healing our emotional, biological karma, really.
Yeah. I have a question about the half cycle. So,
Mm,
if you were, a Taurus Scorpio node in your natal chart, and I didn't specify which one was which, but let's say that you had the North Node in Scorpio and the South Node in Taurus, right? Because we have the North Node in Taurus now and the South Node in Scorpio.
yeah,
Then you're
yeah.
having your half cycle. And what about the half cycle? What can you share with us about what unique properties do we get during the half cycle?
Yeah, it's interesting because at that half cycle, to me, that's when I sometimes want to scream because it's like you really know what you've got to work on because it's loud. It is so loud when that south node or when that, say, Scorpio is sitting, the Scorpio south node may be sitting on your north node. It pulls you. I like to say that it can pull you in a traumatic way to that north node, or because it's going to highlight the natal node, whatever it is, it's highlighted. And if it's the north node, you're really hearing through your life. When I say hearing, I mean events in your life or what's going on internally. It's loud. It's you can't avoid it. And whatever it is you need to heal or whatever direction it is you need to move to, that half node is telling you, okay, knocking on your door, this is what you need to do. And if it's on the south node, it's telling you where you are with the healing process too. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the return would be very important as well. So
Mhm.
for anyone who does have the North Node in Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio, then you would have had your natal placement come around after it's a 19-year cycle. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, it's a 19-year cycle. And I always counsel people to start looking at the events or how they feel about what's going on in their life, um, just before they get that nodal return and right after, what's going on in their life, what external events are triggering them. And that tells them too how much they've healed. I mean, because with healing, we are such a culture of being down on ourselves, and we look at the negative versus looking at the positive. So when you're getting, whether you're getting the nodal return or whether you're getting the opposition, you still have to honor, or in my opinion, you still need to honor the healing that you have done. And I like to sometimes do a ritual at that at the nodal return or even the lunar return. I will do a ritual giving thanks for what I've accomplished, because I'm such a Virgo ascendant. It's always looking to, okay, what's next? Well, take some time to honor what you've done, because it's no easy feat. Number one, being in a body and being here on this earth plane, it's just, let's just say it's hard. And then yes, know what it is you need to work on next, and and go for it. You know, yeah,
yeah.
and be
Okay.
okay with letting go too. That's the other thing with those nodal returns. Sometimes it's time to let go of something, because you'll find sometimes marriages end, jobs will end, things will end because it's time for you to go through the next cycle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about this cycle that is ending and the new one that is starting in
Mm.
Libra and Aries. So, do you want to talk a bit about? I'm not sure if you do much in the mundane world because there's the nodes kind of like as they're existing out there for the whole world, and then
Mhm.
there's the nodes as it exists in a chart. And so collectively, we're all going to experience the change in
Yeah.
signs, right? The nodes going from Scorpio Taurus to Libra Aries. And I'm just curious just to hear your take on this the sign shift, how
Yeah.
how we what to expect from that.
Yeah. And even it's still about relationship. It's our relationship with ourselves versus other. It's courage. Where is Mars? I definitely, with Mars, you need, with Aries, Mars is on stage now with the North Node. And so with that South Node in Libra, I mean, we're looking, like you said, we're looking at this collectively and on the individual level. So what is right human relationship with nature? What is right human relationship with our community? What is Libra? What is the wounding of Libra? And what are the gifts of Libra? Libra, of course, is the scales. And I believe, based on what I've seen and experienced, the path for Libra South Node, or the balancing, is not either or. It's that middle path. That is the way to go with Libra. Now we have to work at it, because with Libra, it can be indecisive. It can be because it sees both sides, and it's asking questions because it wants to understand, because it wants to balance. And that's okay. But it's, I look at it like, oh goodness, there's a tarot card in the Thoth deck, pronouncing that wrong. Not Rider-Waite, it's Crawley, Aleister Crawley
Yeah, the
card,
poly.
where the Crawley deck, where the goddess is standing on the tip of a sword. She's standing there and the sword is tipped down in the ground. To me, that's the perfect balance of Libra. And that's what that's the goal with Libra. It takes courage to do that, though, which brings in the North Node. So how do you then know what is, because you want to know what right action is, especially with Libra, and with all of them, but with Libra in particular, because it's ruled by Venus. And Venus is all about our relationships, all relationships, and relationships with animals, but also with relationships with self. What is that? How do you set boundaries? How does Libra set boundaries? It's a big deal. So we're dealing with this in the collective, and I mostly focus on the individual, but I believe that I know we're seeing it out. It's already beginning out in the public. We're seeing it, and in the mundane area. So, with Aries, it's interesting because this brings in a little bit of esoteric astrology, and I don't know if the audience is familiar with esoteric astrology. In esoteric astrology, Aries is actually ruled by Gemini, and it's because Aries it's that spark, that first initiating light. It's not the diplomat, it's the one who is on the front lines of a war, who are just going for it, but the thinking function isn't as active as it needs to be. And so Aries can get itself into trouble, and it needs to think before it takes that leap. And if it thinks, then it's unstoppable with the courage. And that's how that Mars comes into play. So I would look at the relationship between Mars and Mercury too, because they're how are they in good aspect, and then with Libra, um,
You're seeing in a
the
personal chart, just
mhm,
you're looking at Mars and Gemini. I mean,
mhm.
Mars and
Mars and
Mercury,
actually Mercury.
Mercury.
Yeah.
And in your own chart, like how are they aspected? Are they aspected?
Are they aspected? Because that's going to tell you a lot about the consciousness that is manifesting within you, outward. With that Mars, are you thinking before you leap? That's a higher level consciousness. And then with the Libra, with Venus, you want to look at, are you walking that middle path, which is really a Buddhist path, and are you using that Aries with the Libra? Are you developing your courage to stand your truth, to set your boundaries, to be your personal self, your authentic self, because it's all about being authentically you. Are you bending too far to the left or to the right? We see it in politics all the time. It's fascinating that we have a two-party system, when in fact the middle road is where we need to actually govern. But it takes courage to do that, because we're so pulled toward, or I pull to one side or the other. And there's that fear of rejection, that fear of not being a part of the tribe, of being rejected and pushed out. Whereas, and remember with Venus, Venus says no more than she says yes, because she's looking for the right relationship, the right human relationship. She is the one who chooses, who decides. So Venus is, in this case, she's helping us with that South Node to heal our Libra and our Venusian wounds, and also to heighten the skills that we have. And you have to look at it, of course, by house, whatever house it's in for you, that axis. What is your relationship with money? If it's second house, or your self-esteem, it's biggie. First house, oh my goodness, that first house, seventh house axis. Think about that. If you have Libra in the first house and Aries in the seventh house, that's a paradox, because the natural ruler is Aries for the first house. So Libra is sitting in the first house, having to answer to Mars, really, because she's at Mars's home. But anyway, that's going too much into it. But yeah, this one is going to be fascinating, because we could easily end up with a lot more arguments, a lot more war, when in fact that's not what that is not the highest goal. It's looking at the differences. And the diplomat, what does the diplomat do? The diplomat comes into a room and they look for the commonalities, and they start there. So what is our relationship with different cultures when we think about it in the mundane level? Are we pushing our values onto someone else, telling them that they're wrong and we're right? Is my form of astrology better than your form of astrology? Those, I know that's not really even laughable, because there is that going on. And being able to be in relationship first with yourself in a good way, knowing your boundaries, and still honoring somebody else's belief system. You don't have to believe their way, but honoring it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you already mentioned this, but I just have to go back to it, that Venus is involved in both, and so is Mars. So we're going from earth, water, right, to fire, air, and Venus and Mars are switching positions, or switching, it's
Well, yeah,
right, is North Node
yeah,
now, and then she's going to be South Node in Libra,
yep,
where she was
yep,
North Node in Taurus, whereas it's the
yep.
opposite with Mars. So this is so interesting, and
We're
of course,
seeing it from the other side. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
we're seeing both sides of the same coin.
and this change going into Libra Aries is so much more dynamic, right? It's so much
Yeah.
more communicative with the air sign, and dynamic fire with the fire sign, with Aries being the North Node. It, we this isn't this. Well, we'll just leave it there.
Yeah. I mean, oh my goodness. And think about it from the standpoint of the hemispheres in the chart. I mean, that's the dividing line of the hemisphere. It's first house, seventh house, cusp.
Yeah,
Us versus them, me versus you. It's and it shouldn't be a versus anything.
really, it's because it's about the integration, like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening and you're wondering, how does this affect me? Then you're going to look in your chart, and you're going to want to you want to know where Taurus and Scorpio are, because that's where the nodes are now. We're recording in June of 2023, but
Yeah.
next month, right, they're going to shift backwards, because the nodes primarily move retrograde, and so they'll be in Libra Aries. So those are the parts of your chart you want to look at. I don't know if
Yeah.
you
And if you want to get a feel for what is going to be up for you, if you were alive when they were in this position before, go back and look at your life. The past, what is it, 19 years ago, go back and look at your life to see what was going on in your life during that period. What was up for you? What did you learn? What did you work on back then? Or if maybe you didn't work on anything, and that's fine too, but what was going on in your life? And because everything happens in a spiral, because we're working with evolution. So it comes back to one cycle, and then it comes back to that cycle, but it's just a little bit above. And that means that the events that happen now will be different than the events that happened then, and yet there will be a flavor. There will be an energy signature that will be the same, because the nodes, of course, all the planets move. So when you had this particular configuration 19 years ago or 18 years ago, Saturn was in a different position, Pluto was in a different position. So so that would have flavored, of course, what was manifesting in your life. But you can still tease out the energy of those nodes, and it'll tell you how much you've healed that south node, how much have you moved towards that north node, how much are you integrating them together.
Yeah.
So I
Now,
hope that helps. Yeah.
yeah. Do you use the nodes only in natal analysis, or do you use them in other types of charts?
I use them. I don't use them so much in the solar return chart, but I use them in synastry and in the composite chart. And oh God, it's fascinating. It's quite fascinating when you look at it, because we're dealing with relationships. And so with the synastry chart, I look at if say your south node, somebody has a planet that is conjunct your south node or aspecting it. That was your relationship with that person in a prior life. That's how you saw them. I think I mentioned at one point, say you have Saturn, someone has Saturn sitting on your south node, then you saw them as the authority. You saw them as maybe the father figure or the elder in a prior life, as, smart. Maybe they weren't, but that's the way you saw them. And maybe they were the priest or who knows who they were to you in a prior life, but we pick up where we left off. And that south node, that person with the synastry, the Saturn on your south node, it's not up to them to consciously help you heal your south node. However, they are helping you to heal your south node and to and what I find is they have this authority, especially with Saturn. I had a friend of mine who Saturn was on my south node, and whenever I found myself feeling insecure, or just not good enough, because it's Pisces, and the person would say something that would be, I would be like, oh, yeah, okay. So in that particular part of my life, they were the authority until I was able to own it for myself. Because that's what our relationships do. We draw people to us who show us what it is we need to work on within ourselves and what we need to integrate within ourselves a lot of times. And then when we do it, our relationship with that person changes or whatever. But it's fascinating with synastry, and you can look at it in families, family relationships or significant others. I also look at it in the composite chart, because that tells you the karma of the relationship, the nodal. What relationship did you have together, not in synastry, but say you were a married couple, what was going on in that relationship, or you were siblings or whatever, and that's going to tell you what you are here to work on together in the composite chart, which is, and oh my goodness, with the composite chart, what you're here to work on together can be so totally different than what you're here to work on your own. Your particular nodal story may be different, and yet you're together. And so there's another part of the chart that's highlighted that you're going to have to work on with this person when you're in a relationship with that person.
Wow. I haven't done that before. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a quite fascinating area, because even the composite chart itself is quite fascinating. You find, because there's certain parts of your chart you don't know a lot about, because there's nothing activating it, or maybe there's nothing in that house, and it only gets triggered when something is transiting that house, and then, or maybe even the ruler. Maybe there's nothing in the house where the ruler is. You just never know. But somebody else's chart, maybe they have a lot of planets in a particular sign that activates an empty house for you, and you're going, oh, what do I do now? How do I do?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
and also of a chart where someone may have more planets with the nodes. And then, there's the charts where the nodes are kind of, they're the only placement in a particular sign.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What kind
Yeah,
of statement does?
that's pretty, what you're talking about is the stellium. And I like to, in the house with the stellium, I look at the planet that is the first planet to rise in that house as the leader. So you've got a stellium, say, with Neptune, um, Mercury, maybe the South Node, and then maybe something else. So you're going to lead with that Neptune, and then Mercury is going to be next, and then that South Node gets triggered. And so you're looking at the, you're looking at yourself, of course, as you're Neptunian. They become adjectives in a way to that South Node. So they define who you were in a prior life. You were Neptunian, you were Mercurial, you were, if there's another planet there, you were Jupiterian. That's how you define yourself.
What if
And so
the
that,
node?
hmm?
What if the node was rising first in that house and the stellium is behind it? Does that make
Yeah,
it?
then that node is really going to be out front. It's going to be very prominent. You're going to see it. You're going to see it for good or for ill or both.
It's so,
But
I'm
it's
sure
still,
we have listeners who have that. So I wanted to ask that. It's really interesting. So it's a similar concept to the Oriental planet, like what we look at with the sun, right?
yeah, it's similar. I mean, because you want to look at what was rising first in that house. That's the leader. I mean, when we look at it, a good example of that is the sun and the moon. If the moon rises before the sun, then you lead with your emotions. If the sun rises before the moon, you lead with your logic and and then you're looking at the relationship between the sun and the moon. What's the aspect? Is it a square? Is it a trine? Are they getting along? But and when you're making decisions, going back to the Libra, you really want to integrate and work with the sun and the moon because you want to have balance. So it's like needing to talk together. And isn't it fascinating, though, that we have, like you were saying, we have Mars and Venus, who are the lovers, really, back together. And this is truly about our relationships with each other, I believe. And it's continuing. It's just continuing in a different way. And I love that picture of Venus and Mars. Mars has been off in war somewhere and he's back and he's just exhausted and he's laid out and his sword is one way and his shield is somewhere else. And Venus is sitting on a what do you call it, a daze or something, and she's just looking at him like, really?
I thought maybe she'd be caretaking him.
No.
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 Uh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I,
yeah, I'm sorry. It's a lovely. I love Venus and I love Mars, and you've got to have both. You've got to work with both. So
yeah. And we're having a second look at Venus and Mars in the nodes through their dynamic signs instead of their more passive signs, I guess you could say. And they're switching roles, and that's what makes it so interesting. Do you think that the themes that came up with the Taurus Scorpio where we are now, that they're going to carry through since it's the same ruling planets. It's just it's like they're switching places.
Yeah, they're switching places. And I do believe that these nodes are preparing us for the planets that are going to be changing signs in 2025. Because we're moving into an air, fire, because it's Aries, Gemini, and Aquarius in 2025 with those outer,
Oh, right. Yeah.
with those outer planets. So I think those nodes are preparing us for that shift. I mean, that's just my thought on it. I didn't read it anywhere. It's just,
yeah. Well, and then Saturn's going to join as well. Saturn's going to move into Aries.
And so what are we fighting for? What is our courage? And what do we fight for anyway? And there is a time to fight. You need to know when. And I believe that it's not Mars who determines if we go to war. I believe it's Venus.
I think the ancients said that as well, right? I mean, way back when Venus was more connected with war, if I'm remembering my history correct. I'm sorry, I don't have a reference to share, but I know that I read.
No. As a matter of fact, well, in the British Museum last year, they had an exhibition of, I think, the goddesses. And there's a coin that they have that Julius Caesar had minted whenever he won a war. He had this coin where it's his face on one side and Venus on the other.
And it may have been Minerva, or was it actually Venus?
I think it was Venus. Might have been Minerva, but he attributed her as the one who helped him win these wars.
Yeah. I'm in Italy, so I know what you're talking about, and I see so many statues, and they are the feminine goddess. Yeah.
So she's ruling. She is, people. I do believe that in our modern times, we have reduced Venus to just about sex and love and all that. But she is a fierce goddess. I mean, she's badass. So,
and the timing, right, with the Me Too movement and women in the Western world, of course, speak for the whole world, but we are seeing the movement, and we are seeing women speak up for themselves and not taking some of the things that women have had to deal with prior. Try not to name names, but I think everyone is pretty familiar with the news and what the progression that's happened. And as we go into the Aries Libra nodes, then I think we're definitely going to see more of that. But of course, there's a difference between mundane astrology, which is what's happening on the world stage, and then what's happening in your own personal chart. So maybe you could share with the audience how you work with the nodes in your practice as a life coach and astrologer.
Yeah, and so when I'm working with the nodes in my practice, especially, I love working with them in the natal chart, because I love creating a nodal story for the client. And I will switch up sometimes. Sometimes I will I will work with their nodes first, and let the chart reading support the nodes, the nodal story, because it always does. Or I will do a chart reading without the nodes first, and then do the nodes last. It all depends on the intuitive hit that I get. Should I start there or not? I don't have a definitive, oh, always start with the nodes or always do the chart first. I don't have that. But I find that for me, the chart supports the nodal story so well. And I want to, when I'm looking at the big picture, I'm looking at those nodes as healing. This is where you go to heal. This is where this began in a prior life. I also will sometimes have a client who they want to do a past life regression, to get to the actual story. And I'll do that with them sometimes. But, it's interesting with past life regression, just a little side note, your higher mind is in control. So you never know what it's going to do. You never know if it's going to take you to that lifetime with that story, or it's got you captive now. It's like, oh, you really need to know this over here, not that. So,
Wow, that's so interesting.
yeah. But yeah, so I will, I always give them a nodal story, and I ask them how this resonates with them. And I support that nodal story with the rest of the chart. This is, you're working on this issue. This is why you have Saturn in this position. This is why you have Jupiter here. It's supporting you, or it's helping you, or it's, this is how you need to work on it, because, this, and I look at the Pluto, I definitely look at Pluto there. Because that's the major wounding. So yeah, that's how I do it. And with the transits and progressions, I look at the nodes, the evolving story there. So yeah.
Yeah. Now I know that you're teaching the course at Kepler on the business of the business.
Yes.
So I'm curious, do you use the nodes to help someone figure out, if you want to open your own astrology practice, which is, I know a lot of the people who take your course at Kepler, of course, are going to be astrologers, most of them,
Yes.
not all of them. So when you're talking about the business of the business, do you help a lot of people open their own astrology practice, or, a healing service-based practice? And do you use the nodes in a similar way when you're looking at, the business part of an astrology practice?
When I'm looking at the business part, I will look at the nodes to see if they have, if there's gifts there that are business related. Do you have a business head? Are you able to learn how to run a business or set up a business? It's never whether you should or not, because you can, and you can always learn the skill. So I'll look at it that way, but that's typically as far as it goes. If I see that a person is being triggered by something, maybe they have, I have one client who has a tremendous fear of failure, and, yet wanting to run a business, and constantly coming up with a brick wall that they've created themselves with actually launching. I'll look to the nodes to see, is this where this is originating, or is it Pluto, or is it, where is it in the chart? And a lot of times you can find it in the chart, and a lot of times it does go back to the nodes, but sometimes it's not. But I look at it that way. That's as far as I go with that. And then I coach them through it, helping them because a lot of times it's about taking a leap of faith, and that fear of failure with, and wanting to do it right. Oh my goodness. Everybody, I want to do it right. Really? Whatever happened to failing 50 times before, and then and figuring it out as you go. If you've got to, anyway, I don't get me on the soapbox about
Oh,
that.
I know what you mean. Yes. Failure is part of being a business owner, and we must embrace that if we're going to succeed. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have to, and we learn, and we know what not to do again.
Mhm.
We're
Yeah.
all here for experience,
Yes.
and we just have to, learn from the mistakes. And when you can get past the trauma of the mistake, you can laugh at it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a great quote. I'm probably not going to get it exactly correct, but Steve Jobs said something along the lines that he's convinced that the entrepreneurs that succeed do so because of perseverance, or something like the only thing that differentiates entrepreneurs from the people who want to be is perseverance. So it's kind of that concept of that failure is going to happen, and success comes with perseverance. If you
Right.
have your first failure and you decide you're not good enough and you throw your hat in the ring, then you've kind of missed the point.
Oh, absolutely. I saw a quote the other day from Michael Jordan, and he was talking about all the missed shots that he had, all the things where the times when he failed. And he said, and that's what made him great,
Yeah.
because he just kept going.
And
If you're learning, go ahead.
yeah, would you say that's like South Node stuff there? It's like looking back to the South Node, and that's part of the healing process.
It is. It's a part of the healing process. And it is like peeling back the onion. You fail. Usually when you first try something, you fail at it anyway. And that's okay. That's actually expected. And it's good.
Yes.
You
You
just,
learn.
yay.
Hey.
And yet you honor the fact that you at least stepped up to the plate and you started working on it. You tried. And so you try again, you tweak it, you just keep going. I mean, think about the computers and all the things we have now. I'm pretty sure the creators did not succeed first time out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we keep forgetting as humans that we're here for experience. We're not here to always get it right.
Mhm.
It's about the experience.
All the Sagittarius out there are going, yeah, yeah. But for you Libra people, and I'm one of you, so I understand, us being too nice or worried about pleasing others and how they're going to respond to us. We're going into Libra South Node, and this is
Mhm.
going to be highlighted, right?
Oh yeah, it's going to be highlighted. And I'll tell any Libra South Node, first, you have to find out what you value. What do you value? And you know what the deal breakers are. If you know what the deal breakers are for a relationship, that's your boundary, because you know what you value. So you don't step outside of that. And that helps you to make right decisions for you. And it's like if somebody's asking you to do something that is outside of your value system, and it's not a place that it's not about feeling comfortable with, it's about, if it's something that you don't value, then say no. It's big now. It's up with that. How many times do we say yes when we really want to say no? But we say yes because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And then we find, oh my goodness, then we find ourselves in situations where, oh God, I wish I hadn't done that.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're in it. And you
Yeah.
gotta follow through with it.
Right.
So yeah, and just a little bit on what I've seen since I started paying attention to politics, and not just politics, but in business too. We end up with a lot of yes people who bow to the will of the quote leader. And a lot of times we do it knowing that we're going against our own value system, but we're doing it for the money, we're doing it for the fame, we're doing it because we don't want to be rejected for whatever reason. Venus is not honoring the Venus that is within you, because we all have Venus within us. And we're doing what I said I did, and I didn't know I was doing this until somebody asked me, in a job that I had. I was miserable. Oh God, I was miserable. I did not belong there. This person came up to me and she's like, "Oh, are you okay?" And all of a sudden I burst out in tears at work and said, "I feel like I've sold my soul for a piece of silver." That's what I knew. Oh God.
That was your aha moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is up for us, because when Venus is in Taurus, Taurus is about the raw materials. It's about being in the body. It is about the actual coin or the actual whatever it is we're making or whatever. Whereas Venus, in Libra, is the aesthetics. It's it's beauty. It's on a different level, but it's also mind, because it's an air sign. And so where's our value system with that? And I always tell people, you figure out ahead of time what you value. Always what you value. And that doesn't mean that you can't change your value system, because it does evolve. But and you don't want to say no to something just because you're afraid of it, or but if it still fits within your value system, that's fine. But if it doesn't, no.
Yep.
So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. So that's what's coming. So folks, look at your chart, see where Libra and Aries are in your chart, because that's going to tell you the arena of life. This, what we've been talking about, is most likely to where it's going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
has been wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Marie.
Oh, you're welcome.
I would love it if you would describe just quickly the two courses that you teach. I know one is the business of business, and then the first one was focused mostly on life coaching. Do you want to just share a little bit about your
Sure. The first course, it was fundamentals of life coaching, part 1, and I changed the title for the second one. It was going to be part 2, but the first one focused mainly on really learning what life coaching is, how to how to practice. They practiced doing coaching with each other. We looked at the basics, the fundamentals of life coaching. And then with the second class is life coaching, the business of the business. We're focusing on setting up the business, the pricing, the marketing of the business. And it applies to not just life coaching, but also to astrology. How do you come up with a package? Are you going to focus on one-on-one coaching? Are you going to focus on groups? Are you going to do both? Are you going to be coach with lots of people, or all of that is important with coaching, with life coaching in particular. And this time, with the practice, it's a little different than the first time. The first time it was the first class was mainly coaching without the astrology in the session. With this particular class, you're going to be practicing coaching inside of the astrology reading. So when somebody comes to you with a problem, how are you going to help them resolve that issue looking at the chart? So that's going to be the focus this time.
That's for the business, is the
business of the business, the business of the business. Right.
I keep saying the business in the business.
Right. And it's 5 classes, just like the first part. So we will be, like I said, talking about the marketing piece, which includes, which we have the pricing. How do you decide how much you charge? And we'll be looking at just the different aspects of it. How do you market this? High touch versus low touch marketing. What's your style? And also keeping in mind your own personal style. Your style really determines the marketing that you do. Because if you have a tremendous fear of public speaking, do you really want to be on stage? Do you want to use another form of marketing? Or do you want to work on that fear of public speaking? So yeah, we talk about all of that.
Fantastic. I love how astrology is one of the only, if not the only, type of tool that cuts through the whole one size fits all, right? My marketing plan is not going to be the same as your marketing plan because we have different charts. We have different goals and different things that we're comfortable with, like you just said. So this is a really important topic. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm a firm believer in just what you said. One size does not fit all. I mean, I love public speaking. Therefore, the majority of my marketing is going to be talking to people on stage or networking. But for other people, it may be social media. It may be email marketing. It could be, a referral. There's different ways to do it. So we're going to talk about all of that, including, talking about websites and all that good stuff.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here, Marie. And thanks to all of you for tuning in and watching this YouTube video. And we will see you hopefully in class or on another video or one of our webinars. We're producing a lot of content for you. So enjoy and prepare yourself for that nodal shift. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Marie.
You're welcome. Thank you.